minutes is practically impossible. But we have some people. One person is not here. I think two presentators are not here, so we have more time. Let me calculate. The system is simple. We have all the presentations, and at the end we are going to the chat to answer the questions, to discuss. But to the people that, I don't know how many people are, 34 participants. So the other participants, I invite them to go into the chat and put the questions alongside the presentations. Okay, don't wait to the end. Going to put, and then it's easy to me to take a look on them and organize the discussion at the end. I think that let 18 minutes and 2 minutes spare. Okay, 2 minutes to. Okay, but try to make a presentation in 18 minutes. Okay, I think that's with 2 minutes of tolerance. If yesterday, for example, there are people that didn't use all the 15 minutes. Very organized people. So let's get started. Who is the first? Let me see. I think that the first is Maida is not here. Huh? So the first presentation is William, Understanding Incentives within the Bioeconomy Framework.
Okay.
Okay. A very interesting subject. Huh? Let's go.
Right. It'd be more economics, perhaps, than bioeconomy. Now, how do we do this? Will you open the presentation and I can control it?
Yeah, so you do have this share screen, this green button. So you press the green button and put your presentation. I think that's
okay. So I'll from my own computer.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So let me.
It's easier than we imagined before.
Okay. So perfect. So I go to share screen. I go to my presentation. And I go to the front. This is a little slow. You can see that right now.
Sure.
And what in the hell? Oh my God! What do you see?
Oh, I see the first slide.
The first slide, understanding incentives within the bioeconomy. Perfect. I've changed the title slightly to put
I have to shut my.
And now I can't hear you. All right. Real quick, then, I have 15 minutes. I'm going to try to take 15 minutes. These are the things I would like to discuss. One is the role of incentives in farmer quality decisions. The second is linking those quality decisions with respect to loss and waste decisions. Farmers choosing the distribution of quality, which includes the loss levels, then linking that set of decisions of product quality and loss levels to decisions with respect to entering into bioeconomy activities, such as bio-waste, as fuel, feed, or some other valorized use. I'm going to put a little emphasis on the valorization question. And so we can link quality decisions to bio-waste, activity decisions to loss levels. And then I want to show a few simple fun facts. So with regards to the introduction of bioeconomy alternatives and how that might induce changes in quality distribution, the distribution of qualities, the composition of production. It will pull resources from the production of food, production for food for human consumption, but likely increase overall, at least farmer welfare. Okay, in the context here, I have this State of Food and Agriculture. This is from last year. This is FAO's flagship publication. I don't know if you can see the title at the very bottom, Moving Forward on Food Loss and Waste Reduction. We got into this topic via the food loss and waste theme, and then the bioeconomy activities become relevant, especially on the waste side. I'm going to focus mainly on the bio-waste question. These are some of the key messages of the State of Food and Agriculture from last year. Food loss and waste is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. They discuss, this is more boilerplate, we call it in English, than anything else. Then they get into some numbers. About 14% of food produced is lost from the farm to before the consumer. And the two things that are important as an economist, I think, are the use of information that we have to have if we're even interested in following food loss and waste. But the other is balancing the economic benefits with the costs. So the fourth message of the State of Food and Agriculture is that reducing food loss and waste can generate economic benefits. This is more fuzzy. The thing that's more concrete, it'll also have a cost. As low-cost options for reducing food loss and waste are exhausted, then you're going to increase those costs, and then inevitably some loss and waste is going to be come up. Here is something to put things in context as well. Here's a picture, a piece of art by Jean-Francois Millet in the mid-19th century. It's talking, I like to use this picture because it illustrates the balance we have to make between reducing losses and the cost of it. And the question is, we can always reduce food loss and waste to zero if we put enough resources into that activity, but we have costs. In particular, it's the opportunity costs of other resources and human time, right? And that's something we always have to be considering in studying food loss and waste, and in trying to relate that to, say, the bioeconomy activities. Okay, here are some important questions, just to put this in context, regarding the analysis of food loss and waste, and by extension then to our analysis of bio-waste activities. Limited selection, I'll just highlight two here. Where are the coordination problems? Where are the so-called market failures in this discussion? Where are the non-pecuniary externalities that we might have? What are the common property problems that we might have? Free rider problems in particular, the malalignment of incentives. What are the public goods? This is a poorly developed argument in the literature on food loss and waste. There are some plausible externalities, especially related to what are called calentamiento global, and I can't even remember the name of it. Climate change. That's it. And say methane production, global greenhouse gas type of production. And there's some common property goods contingent on the type of waste management you might have in a city. Public goods questions are a little less plausible. But the bioeconomy emphasis enters with respect to how economic agents determine the amount of food loss and waste that we can observe. I see a whole bunch of things in the chat, but I'm going to plow along since I can't see those very well. Here's another context with respect to waste valorization. This is from the Royal Society of Chemistry. This is about 7 years ago, and this is their report to the House of Lords Select Committee on Science, Technology, a call for evidence. It's called Waste Opportunities, Stimulating a Bioeconomy. I like this report because as a non-chemist and a non-engineer, I like the way they approach presenting the more engineering questions and the more, especially from the chemical engineer standpoint, the technical questions in a way that a layman can follow. But one thing about engineers, they also do consider costs and benefits. And so let me just read this. The abundant volumes of waste are generated in the United Kingdom, almost 300 million tons each year, containing a huge diversity of functionalized chemical components. These are like the raw inputs to a chemist, which could be exploited for higher value applications of process collectively known as waste valorization. And this is where we introduce the notion that we can move from waste having a low opportunity cost to a high opportunity cost, and that's what I want to focus on. They also note that while there could be waste valorization, there has to be costs, and they identify four costs in this report. One, it's the expensive collection and consolidation, especially over small producers. There's transport costs and the like. There's a subtle idea that once a co-product enters the waste stream, it loses opportunity value. It loses option value. That is, you can move food into the waste stream, but you can't move from the waste stream into the food stream. And so that you have to remunerate people for that. There's also the question of spoilage and degradation that requires storage facilities on the farm during the transport and the like. And then finally, there's something that's the processing expenses of these food loss and waste. Okay, here's our basic model of quality and loss decisions. I just want to set this up. I'm going to do this all very intuitively. There are inputs that feed into the production relationship, but the production relationship involves producing several types of products at different levels of quality, each quality level having some price associated with it. Here, I'm just ranking them according to the price. The price is an aggregator of all the hedonic relationships between the characteristics of products, but eventually we have a unidimensional way of indexing our quality of production. It's essentially price. There's going to be some level of losses that's natural, where the net price that we're gaining from this, from a unit more production, is going to be zero. And this is where our interest in the bioeconomy and bio-waste comes in. We, in principle, can use these losses and waste and non-food uses, perhaps as inputs into the farming process itself, or if it is some other activity, for example, moving these ingredients downstream into the production of other products. But that introduces a shadow price, at least, if not an explicit price for those goods. And so we're going to have a decision at the farm level of moving from one system where these losses have a zero price to a system where these losses have a valorization, as it were, to use the terms from the Royal Society of Chemists. And this is a result in a graphic form. This is really all I want to say, and I could stop essentially after that. I want to show you some numbers to explain what's going on. But to summarize things in an intuitive way, we have on the horizontal axis the price and quality dimension. All the characteristics that make up quality will be dumped into price. We can essentially take a multidimensional problem, and through some hedonic analysis, we come up with a price. There's some critical price at which we're not going to sell into our traditional or normal markets. If we don't have any other alternative, this becomes the loss and waste. The vertical axis, I'm simply saying this is the percent of total production, and you can integrate over from 0 to your critical price, and that's going to be your loss and waste. When we introduce a bio-waste, say, activity, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to increase the opportunity cost of selling into the traditional market. And that just by itself will have a reduction in the supply into the traditional markets, and an increase in our what would otherwise be a waste. Right? So simply our opportunity costs change, but people can take advantage. They can take advantage of good things and they can mitigate against bad things. Here is an introduction of a new market that wasn't there before, and so people will make a change. And the change that happens is that the marginal benefits, the marginal net benefits of increasing quality diminish simply by the increase in the opportunity cost of selling into the traditional market. And so what will we expect? We expect a compounding effect. The critical price increases. That would, if nobody does anything except make a decision of traditional market or the waste market, then they'll increase the waste market, reduce the traditional market. But further than that, they will cut back on the resources that they're using to assure quality, because they don't lose as much as they would have before. There's still perhaps a price difference between the two markets, but the introduction of the bio-waste activities will increase the opportunity cost, that is, reduce that difference between the two prices. To illustrate that farmers really can control quality, we've done some research in cereal production in Tunisia, and I'm just going to summarize the results here by this graph, where we can show there are two types of decisions we have here. Scale of your level of production is perhaps a very long-term decision, fraught with many restrictions on the farmer's ability to scale up. That's one, but that's one characteristic. The other characteristic is if you adjust the machinery for your combine harvesting in cereals, and whether they adjust or not. Well, there's a very clear relationship between the scale of production and your loss levels. So very small producers in Tunisia, and they tend to be small, have losses, some of them over 10%, some of them around 5%, but they average on the order of 9%. The very large guys have very few losses in percentage terms, although in volume terms they could still be significant. If they set the machine, as it were, they adjust the harvester machine to the conditions they have, then they will have even smaller losses. And this is something that is a question of economics. People who don't set the machine are not stupid. All right, they're just simply not stupid. It's just that there's a cost, and you have to spread those fixed costs of adjusting your quality over your scale of economy, and you have less people who are small who are adjusting the machine, and as you get bigger, you have more people adjusting the machine, and the differences appear to be roughly similar to scale, except when you get to the very large farms. And this is more of a regression statistical question. We don't have very many observations of farmers who don't set their machine at or adjust their machine at large scales, and so our ability to detect a difference just drops out. that's one example. We have another example from Chile. This is what we're working on right now. Distribution of cherry sizes here. I'm showing the size of the cherry that determines the price you're going to receive for your production. There are other characteristics like firmness of the cherry. There's other dimensions. Here I'm just going to look at the size of the cherries, and this is from.
We're approaching the last 2 minutes.
Okay, this is the last. This is the percentages that we have here on the losses, or not losses, production values. You can see that we have large scale losses above 10%. As you move across these categories from small to super premium, we have a distribution. Well, we can show that the type of producer can control his loss levels, and that you're declining in loss levels for types of producers, or an increasing in your premium levels. So producers really can determine losses. Then I'm going to jump over these models. I wanted to have a possibility, don't have time, to demonstrate some algebraic results, some numerical results, what we have from loss levels, and just come to this big takeaway that summarizes these things. Incentives matter for the distribution of farm product quality, including the proportions of losses or waste. And then the food loss and waste levels are rational in the sense that at the level of decision makers. All right, somebody might object to them at the level of society, but not at the level of individual decision makers. Losses are rational, and you can't look at it in any other way. In fact, this is we have a campaign right now in the FAO to talk of food loss and waste and the bioeconomy without recognizing that incentives matter and loss levels are important, is to really avoid reality. Too many people get into this thinking that food loss and waste is some sort of moral crusade. That's just not the way it is. The adoption of bio-waste activities for farm products, this is the analysis that I'm jumping over, will shift the distribution of qualities and lower the proportions of product going to traditional markets. That's perhaps very important in the context of developing countries and production for consumers. If you start diverting from consumers, you're going to have losses. If you're diverting to bio-waste, for example, you're going to have losses for consumers, and everything really will depend.
20 minutes.
You have the increase opportunity costs of producing for traditional markets. That's going to be the key that's going to determine your distributions and your whether you participate in a bio-waste or bioeconomy activity. And then finally, fixed costs that are the most important. And just to jump up, I want to just show you a quick graph. This just demonstrates productivity levels of a farmer and their net benefits. The curve, the blue line, is associated with not having bioeconomy and not paying any cost. These straighter lines are if you introduce the bioeconomy activity, the bio-waste. The very low productivity persons will not participate, and the very high productivity persons will not participate. As your fixed cost of entering into the bio-waste market increases, the probability that you're going to participate reduces, and you're going to have this division, this bimodal type of distribution with the people in the middle participate.
Okay. Very interesting, but we have to finish. William, now we have 5 presentators again, so we have to finish. Thank you. I think that we can discuss at the end.
Right.
Very, very insightful. I love it. But okay, let's move to other presentations. Thank you. If you shut, yes. Thank you, William. I think Marnix Dorn is replacing. Yeah. Hi, Marnix.
Hi. Good afternoon.
Yes. Good afternoon. Is replacing the first presentation, Maria Maida.
Yeah,
Bioeconomy
correct.
Strategy for Public Policies in Beekeeping, Food Security, and Sustainable Management of the Sector. Is it true? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely correct.
So let's move to presentations. You have the green button to press, and good luck.
Here it comes. I didn't have it clear whether it was in English or in Spanish, so the presentation is in Spanish and I will present in English.
Okay. I would rather in English because there are some, I don't know if there are people that's not Spanish speaking that able to understand Espanol, but please do what's better to you.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Try to keep up because
I think if I do it in Dutch,
we thought we had four people and now we have 5 again. So I hope that you need to keep up with 15 to 18 minutes, please. And William had
okay, the screen is on. Let me see.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, does it work? Okay. Only have a problem. Here it goes. So my name is Marnix Doorn, working for Fraunhofer and also presenting. I guess William is also presenting from Santiago de Chile. My colleague couldn't attend. Unfortunately, she's home on Cuba, and internet connections there don't really deal well with Zoom. So instead, I'll replace her. We're going to talk about bioeconomy in the context of policies and beekeeping. Since 2017, we're running a program on beekeeping related to bee health and agriculture production in Latin America, covering and monitoring and understanding what's happening between beekeeping and agriculture productivity. Understanding how this influences the production of food worldwide, considering everything that's happening in the world, and we could add COVID to that, but climate change, loss of biodiversities, loss of native species, introduction of invasive species, loss of pollinators, etc., etc. So considering that scenario, what is happening in the world and what's happening specifically in Latin America, considering this scenario and considering the potential of Latin America as food provider for the world. And in all of that, kind of a sector very often forgotten is the beekeeping sector, that is kind of really depending and influenced by all these different factors. Of course, in Latin America, although I heard various presentations this morning, we can have discussions about what is really the increase in productivity and food production in Latin America. On netto, there was a lot of diversity. I saw some really interesting graphs. But in the end, where it comes to, if we talk about biology and bioeconomy, we have created production systems. And I'll just take a case of the avocado production, that we have intensified production to try to increase and reach maximum outputs. And that's based on technified agriculture production, every time making it more technical and leaving the environment out of what is actually your production unit. We see here an avocado plantation here near Santiago de Chile. And our neighbors in Peru are doing the same. But what they did is where we're looking at drill a hole in the Andes, have water from the Amazon coming to the desert. And what we see here is a small plantation of 7,500 hectares of avocado production in the middle of the desert. And if we talk about bioeconomy, often we think about production. William also showed a really interesting presentation about what is production, but we also are confronted with consumers that every time ask for different and better production and comment on how food is produced. When we see here some German text, there was last year an interesting questioning about avocado production in Chile related to the use of water. You see it here underneath. The amount of water avocados need to grow increases with every Facebook post and the number of liters. But also in Mexico, there have been issues. So on one hand, we see a policy that we want to make this step to biological, and that's what the consumers want. On the other hand, we have production systems that provide these same consumers with the healthy products they like to eat, but might not be that in equilibrium with the environment. And what has beekeeping to do with this, and why is it important, and what has it to do with policy? If we look at a couple of numbers, and again, I just took 2 countries, we could add others here, is that bees are one of the inputs for productivity of avocado, and that results in an estimated exports, what I show here, of a considerable amount of millions of dollars. And the picture shows clearly what happens if you have avocado production without bees on the left and with bees on the right. So pollination is essential for productivity. And then if we go further, and where there's actually still quite some research lacking, and then we get back to the cherries, William also named, also post-harvest quality is influenced by good pollination. So it has to do with shelf life as well. Then when we look at the numbers provided, we see that there is a decrease in pollinators. So on one hand, we're expanding intensive production. On the other hand, and maybe because of that and our production system, we see that the insects that provide productivity in case of fruit production diminish. And then if we look specifically at the honeybee, so beekeeping, beekeepers that provide the pollination services, we also see that to provide all that food in some kind of way, there is a need for more animals, in this case insects, to actually do that work and get this pollination done. What goes hand in hand, and that's kind of everybody understands now with COVID, the more people you put together and the closer you put them together, the faster virus spread, and the same goes for animals. So the world, or the Facebook stories that there are less bees in the world than there ever were, that's not true. There are more bees than ever on the world because we need more food than ever, and we have production systems that need them. So if we talk about animal health, first of all, and we talk about public policies, there is a lot of discussion in Latin America about the use of pesticides. There's written a lot about the bee health, the pollinator themes. But then if we look at real policies for a sector that is so important for agricultural productivity, we see that most of the countries actually lack a regulatory framework. And there is a big confusion, and maybe everybody can relate to animal health if we talk about cattle or sheep or whatever other type of animal. But in the end, it comes down to the same. Healthy food products should be produced with good practices, and the producers are responsible to do that. On the other hand, they are not responsible for public policies and the control of sectors. And therefore, we have the different institutions. We see here a little photo of the Colombian ICA, for example, as one. It can be SAC, it can be other sanitary organizations that are responsible for animal health. So we do need fiscalization also in a sector that provides such an important service. So, and then also for the intensification, the same as in agriculture, if we talk about going back to the biologicals, the first thing, if we talk about public health and also animal health, is of course prevention, and the same goes in agriculture. And what we have seen in this research project, where we're looking at 5 countries in Latin America, is that unfortunately there is often a lot of use of medicine in beekeeping, which would not be necessary if you would kind of improve management practices. Yeah, so there should be an integrated value chain where there is coordination and control, and there should be taken measures to keep this sector, this particular type of husbandry, healthy. And for that, and then we come to the policy issue, we have been advocating and trying to demonstrate also by measuring in different territories in Argentina, in Colombia, in Costa Rica, in Chile, that, okay, what we see here on the picture is the same plantation we saw before. You see it here. This is a avocado plantation. In Chile, they grow against the hills to avoid damage by the cold during the winters. We put a beehive here that is going to pollinate, and we estimate that a bee on an average economically can fly 3 kilometers or in a certain space to do its job, in this case, in this avocado plantation. However, if we put different numbers of hives in different places within the plantation, what we see is that these animals will cross. And now we come to the same issue we have with COVID. No, how are we going to create traceability to allow for reaction and containing the virus? And the same happens here. So what happens if you have a 7,500 hectare avocado plantation and you fill that up with 5 hives per hectare? Let's take the low number. And all these animals are crossing and going for the same feed sources. So what we need, and here is an example from Cuba, which implemented this system, in this case for beekeeping already 20 years ago. You need to kind of start planning, not only like city planning, but you also need, in terms, if we really want to go to a more biological economic model, you will need to plan your agriculture activities to really understand what is happening, what are the risks, and how we can prevent risk, and how different sectors can optimize their joint activities in the field. In that case, then, if there is a problem, a health problem, and there is a focal area where there is a virus, a bacteria, whatever kind of outbreak, you can actually zone the risk zones where the influence of that outbreak can come, and you can go from the outer ring to the inner ring to actually measure where you really have your problems. And that helps to kind of manage, in this case, bee health. But the same models are applicable to cattle and are applied to cattle and, for example, also salmon farming. Besides that, and this is the basis, so if we want to make public policies to actually kind of really look into how we're gonna
any mistake in your approach in the time. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Beekeeping is essential, and for that we need to have policies that really kind of allow us to manage our agriculture, and that has to do with territorial planning. It has, of course, to do with understanding how we change practices and how we make the sector more sustainable, and that has also to do with a control system for animal health, and that's implementation. And therefore, again, you need the territorial management the control of medicine, animal medicine, coordinated intervention if there are problems. Again, the example of COVID, I think, has made us clear how important it is to take controlled and joint measures to control a certain outbreak. And of course, in any animal sector, it's important that the state regulates the quality of genetic material that's been used. This is one of the things we implement in this really complicated structure of our food production. And I think it's one of the examples that we need new structures of policy towards kind of taking a more integrative view on agriculture and to go to a truly bioeconomy using all the resources we have in terms of ecosystem services and other implements for agriculture. Thank you.
Jose? Jose Maria, can you hear us? Okay, I think Jose may be indisposed. If that's the case, the next participant can go ahead and set up.
Who is the next participant?
Who is?
I forgot to open my microphones. Just to do three things simultaneously is not easy. Okay, we have the next presentation is Diana. Okay, Diana Carolina Parada, Evaluation Alternative Materials Obtained from Agro-Industrial Waste in Peruvian Amazon. Okay, let's go. Diana, put your presentation. And I remember you to put is thinking about the questions and writing in the chat, because make it easier to me to select to improve the questions. Hi Diana, how are you? I saw your face or picture. No? Is Diana here?
No, she seems to have dropped. If not, maybe she had some technical issues. She'll come back. We can move on to the next person, which would be Maria Soledad Puechegao.
Yes.
Until she comes back, until Diana comes back, then she can go last.
Oh, people, now, and the next is Maria Soledad, no? Is Andres Garcia. I think that is Mauricio, no?
Mauricio, yes, I'm here.
Let's go, Mauricio.
So let me share the screen. Are you looking at the screen now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, well, I just want to start saying a few words about this project we are working on. We are 4 people, Laura Ramirez, Simon Villegas, Andres Garcia, and me, working on this project. So the purpose of the project is to develop and implement a methodology for the construction of bioeconomy indicators in Antioquia. By the way, Antioquia is like a state we call department in Colombia. Antioquia is one of the 32 states or regions in Colombia. So we are trying to estimate the size of the bioeconomy in this region in order to produce information for policy makers in terms of monitoring, assessing the evolution of the bioeconomy in the region. I think a good starting point is precisely to have the size of the bioeconomy in terms of design and implement public policies for the different sectors that are part of the bioeconomy. Let me, how can I move this? Okay, so we are gonna check some of these points, a brief introduction, the size of the Colombian bioeconomy, the size of the bioeconomy in the state of Antioquia, the human capital for the bioeconomy in Antioquia, and some figures related to the knowledge and research in bioeconomy in Antioquia. So the whole story begins with this relationship between the natural system and the economic system. As you probably know, in terms of developing bioeconomy, the bioeconomy in a framework of sustainable development, we need to articulate the natural system or the natural capital with the economic system. So here we include the ecosystem services like services from the supply side, the regulation, cultural, and also services related to the support of the ecosystems. So on the other hand, we have the economic activities, basically production and consumption of goods and services that include all the natural capital and natural resources. So this is basically the framework for the project in order to estimate the size of the bioeconomy. So there are different and many definitions of bioeconomy, but here in this project, we adopted the same definition as the Global Bioeconomy Summit in 2018 adopted. So it includes the production, use, and conservation of biological resources, including knowledge. And that's why we are trying to estimate the importance of knowledge and research in bioeconomy as a part of the whole picture of the bioeconomy activity. So we adopted the same definition of bioeconomy as they adopted from the Global Bioeconomy Summit in 2018. So this picture here shows a timeline of the bioeconomy in Colombia. This is just to say that Colombia is doing important job in terms of public policy related to natural resources, and in particular, since the new constitution in 1991, Colombia has been following a sustainable development path, at least in the constitution, and some laws after that are promoting the sustainable development, including policies on biodiversity, natural capital, green growth. For example, this is the last one is in 2018 regarding the green growth path for Colombia, and it includes all the policies that try to foster the biodiversity, sustainable agriculture, and sustainable forests in Colombia. Oops. Okay. Now, this is the approach we are using to measure the size of the bioeconomy, first of all, in Colombia. So we use input-output tables from the national accounts in order to estimate the bioshare of each sector according to this international classification of economic sectors for the whole economy. So here we are including the three main economic sectors in any economy. Sector one is the primary sector, of course, excluding the mining and oil sector. The second sector is the manufacturing sector, and the third one is it includes services and commerce. Of course, all of these sectors use inputs from the bioeconomy. So the first step in this project was to estimate these bioshares from the input-output tables and also from the national accounts. So it gives the following results. In terms of these three sectors, primary sector, which includes agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and aquaculture. So this sector has a 62% of participation in terms of bioeconomies. The size is around 60%. The secondary sector, it means industry and manufacturing sector, represents 22% of the bioeconomy, and the services sector represents 16%. If we break up the primary sectors in terms of agriculture, coffee, cattle, forestry, and fishing, we have a more complete picture of the size of the bioeconomy in Colombia. Now, we can consider some of these secondary sector, or it means manufacturing, and also the tertiary sector, it means services. The main activities are food and beverage, meat products, and milling and starches, with more than 7% of the participation of the bioeconomy in terms of the bioshares of the sectors. In terms of employment, we started working with value added and for the size of the bioeconomy, and also the employment. We apply these bioshares according to the specific economic sectors in order to estimate the size of the employment for Colombia and also for the state of Antioquia. So in that sense, we came up with these figures. The employment is quite significant for Colombia. 4.5 million people, which represents 21% of jobs in 2017. Those jobs are from the bioeconomy, which is a huge number in terms of the employment in Colombia. And if we divided these jobs in terms of the three main sectors, we can find this kind of distribution of the employment in these three main sectors. What about in Antioquia? Well, Antioquia is the second regional economy in Colombia. It has 6.6 million of population, and the GDP of Antioquia represents around 14.5% of the total GDP of Colombia. The primary sector accounts for 13 of the total primary sector in Colombia, while manufacturing is 19%. This is one of the most richest regions in biodiversity. If Antioquia were a country, it would be the 5th country in biological resources worldwide. So that's why we think to measure or estimate the size of the bioeconomy in this region is quite important in terms of getting economy growth in a sustainable way, taking into account the natural resources, including, of course, biodiversity. So these are the figures if we compare Colombia and Antioquia in terms of the size of the bioeconomy. The value added for the whole country is around 11%, almost the same in Antioquia. In terms of employment, if we look at the figure for Colombia, as I said, 21%, and Antioquia contributes with almost 17% of the employment from the bioeconomy. One important issue here is the informal sector or informal employment in terms of jobs. In Colombia, as in many other Latin American countries, the informal sector is quite big. These figures are proof of this informality in terms of the employment. In Antioquia, almost 70% of the employment in the bioeconomy activities, this informal sector is quite big. So it implies a lot of challenges for public policy in Colombia. On the other hand, this is the map of Antioquia, the region we are talking about. And if we look at the figures, the darkest part of the map means the intensity of the bioeconomy activities. If we take out the primary sector, if you look at the map on your right, it means the participation of the other sectors, including the lowest portion of the bioeconomy. On the left, this dark green part means the great intensity of the bioeconomy, including the primary sector. On the right, it is excluding the primary sector. What about education? When we talk about the bioeconomy, we always forget to consider the human resources to develop the bioeconomy. It means education in all levels, basically higher education, including graduate studies, but also we have to consider research and creating new knowledge on bioeconomy. So if we look at the figures in terms of field of knowledge, for example, engineering and related areas, agronomy, veterinary and related areas, mathematics and natural sciences, and health sciences. So this is the distribution of the enrollment in higher education programs related to bioeconomy, comparing Antioquia and Colombia. But if we go further, it is important to recognize the lower participation of this knowledge, field of knowledge related to bioeconomy. In terms of the whole country, just 9% of the people enrolled in higher education.
2 minutes to go, please.
Okay. In terms of higher education, just 9% of the young people enrolled are studying areas related to bioeconomy. In Antioquia is almost the same figure. In terms of, I'm gonna go fast for these slides, and I just want to mention the research in bioeconomy. In the whole region of Antioquia, we were able to find 2 research groups dedicated to specifically areas of bioeconomy. When we go deeper in those research groups, we found 66 groups when we include other terms like sustainability and sustainable development in our search of data regarding research groups in the national system of science and technology. And when we include other categories like biotechnology or just the word bio, we found 222 groups working in areas related to biology and biotechnology. The main challenges for Colombian bioeconomy are we need to go further in estimating different variables of the bioeconomy and biotechnology in Colombia. We need to strengthen our national system of science, technology, and innovation agenda in terms of develop more knowledge and research in order to increase the importance of public policies oriented towards the bioeconomy. We need to define incentives to promote the bioeconomy activities as mechanisms to encourage action in those areas. We also need to improve the coordination among different national and regional and local entities, especially from the government. And also we need to improve our educational systems in order to increase the number of people related and to increase the human resources to be able to develop the bioeconomy in not only in the region of Antioquia, but also in Colombia as a country. Thank you very much.
Oh, what's happened here? Okay. Now it's open. You can close your presentation, please.
Sure.
Some questions are coming up. Thank you. Please close your presentation.
Okay, let me.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think the next presentation is Jamil. Okay, am I right? Jamil Campos, yes. Are you here, Jamil?
Yes, I'm here.
So you have the green button and approximately 20 minutes.
Thank Thank you.
A little bit less, please. Okay, we are right on the schedule. No problem. We have 2 more presentations.
Really? Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes,
Sure.
perfect.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Ask you to raise the sound of your microphones so low.
Are you here? Hi. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamil. I'm from Brazil. Here in Brazil, it is still afternoon. It's a great pleasure to participate in another edition of this event. I will present an article that is the result of my doctoral thesis, and had my counselor Andrea Leda Ramos de Oliveira from University of Campinas. I also had the collaboration of Bruno Miyamoto from the Federal Institute of Rio Grande do Sul, and Professor Ana Paula Milanês from the Federal University of Technology of Paraná, all Brazilians. And the Professor José Maria, the chairman of this section, was member of my doctoral evaluation board, so they helped me. So I will tell a bit about the story behind this article. So first, after decades of institutional and economy uncertainty, the national ethanol market recovered its strength in 2003, the year of the advent of flex fuel engine technology. Since then, the demand of ethanol has grown cumulatively by approximately 300%. The hypothesis is that costs such as tariffs and transport costs, which include transaction costs and other costs related to structural issues of transport and logistics, are present in the national and international trade chain. Many of these costs, however, because they are unobservable and difficult to measure, remain unexplored in discussions related to commercialization. Nevertheless, they occur can strongly interfere with research results and policy evaluations. The aim, the purpose of this study is to analyze the effects of logistics costs and the costs of trade transactions for ethanol in the national market, Brazilian market, and in exports, evaluating the main impacts of the variables of such costs on the competitiveness of Brazilian ethanol. What did we discover? We found that a new design for the ethanol chain, where lower tax of the product coupled with lower transportation costs results in new business opportunities. We choose to apply a partial or spatial equilibrium model, as it is known, because in this model it's possible to simulate different scenarios and to project for each scenario in addition to production, consumption, prices, and quantities traded, taking into account changes in the policy instruments implemented. It is also possible to measure the gains and the losses in well-being for each of the participating agents in each region. SE and ENKI, for multiple regions selling a homogeneous product and each region having a distinct market, the regions are separated from each other, but not isolated. For each region, it is necessary to know local production functions, local price, and consequently, the difference between what is exported and what is imported for each region. The partial equilibrium models elect a sector or a product, although it can be expanded to multi-products, to be analyzed and examine the effects of exogenous variation of the relative price on the sector's equilibrium, assuming that the allocation in the rest of the economy remains uncharged. Therefore, in the partial equilibrium model, we analyze the direct effects of any trade policy on a particular market. These approaches allows a very detailed assessment of the sector studied. As Alvin presented, this approach aims to solve trade problems between different regions, presenting offers, demands, and different trade flows, spatially separated. These models are also known as spatial equilibrium models. The spatial equilibrium models have been frequently used to analyze problems of competitiveness between agricultural regions. Moreover, spatial equilibrium models were traditionally developed by Samuelson and Enki, and then enhanced by Takayama and Jude, assuming that the market structure adopted is the perfect or monopolist competition. But this is not really of most markets. Therefore,
okay. No, so speed up a little bit. You are going to the presentation, the model, please.
Okay. So our model is formulated by MCP, mixed complementary problem. And the MCP can be describing according to the equation. Which represents the conditions for obtain prices, quantities produced and consumed, and trade flows between regions, taking into account logistics costs and transaction markets. The MCP model is presented below, considering the regions of demand, domestic and international. J is the ethanol supply regions, I is the domestic demand, and K is the international demand for regions for ethanol. The optimal solution of this MCP is obtained from the convergence of the equations 1, 2, and 3. In equation 4, there is a conditional of complementary where the market price of demand region I must be always be lower than the offer price of region J, plus transportation costs and the transaction and the fare of the demand region. Equation 5 is the same complementary only to international demand. Equation 6 guarantees the non-negativity of the quantities produced, consumed, and traded. Other side, if there is no commercial flow, this means that the prices in the region of demand is less than the price in the region of supply, plus transport and transactional costs and the fair. To 7 and 8 now. The estimates are obtained through two phases of the MCP. This is the phase 1. And the phase 1, initially, the costs of the transaction will be estimated, the quantities of and prices of supply and demand, the quantities of the commercial flow, and the logistical costs, where the costs of transactions are endogenous and the other variables are exogenous to the model. The variable represent the costs of commercial transactions between the producer and region J and I is an endogenous variable of the model. Transactional costs represent this gamma, and the other variables are exogenous. To estimate the trade flow between the regions of excess of supply and excess of demand, and origin destination matrix was developed in the first phase. The conditional of complementary given in equations 10 and 11 assumes that the market price of the region of J, the demand J, must be higher than the offer price of region I, plus transport costs, transaction costs of the tariff has the rate for each region. The second phase, the transaction costs generated in the first phase are introduced in the program, and the transaction costs are estimated exogenously with the quantities and prices of supply and demand, which become an exogenous variable. At the stage, the variable represents transaction costs generated in the first is represented by a gamma with a hat. I don't know what is exactly the name. And the data to the model. I don't know.
Sorry. Speed up a little bit because you are going straight to details. Try to present the results. So we don't have time to this.
Okay. So the results, we have the basic scenario and scenario 1, 2, and 3. So the basic scenario was generated in second phase in the model from the estimates obtained in the first phase and calibration of the model, where the results serve as parameters for proposed alternative scenarios. Alternative scenarios were simulated, and there are 3 main scenarios proposed, although for the realization for this study, about 32 scenarios were tested. The scenario 1 is a simulation of 20% of a reduction in transportation costs, 20% of increase in the cost of transportation. Scenario 2 is proposed a 20% reduction in the rate value and 30% increase in the rate. And scenario 3 is proposed a 30% reduction in the amount of the tariff and the cost of transport, and 30% increase in the rate and the cost of transport. The value of 20% was defined according to the variation of the cost of transportation in 2016 year. The result, we can see the volumes handled for each alternative scenario and shows their variation in relation to the base scenario. Scenario 1 showed that when the transport costs is increased by 30%, the trade flow decreased 3.7%, and when the transport is reduced by 30%, the trade flow increases by 0.9%. In scenario 2, tariff variations are tested. When the tariffs are increased by 20%, the commercialized flow is reduced by 3.9%. And when reducing the amount of charges in 20%, there is an increase of 4.8% in the flow market. This shows that the model is more sensitive to changes in rate than in shipping costs, or that variations in rates cause a great effect on the ethanol market than the cost of transport. Scenario 3 is the main scenario because it is tested the valuations for the shipping costs and for fee combined. The result is that when we increase 20% market cost.
We have another presentation today, okay? So we are just on the schedule. You are trespassing. So go through the conclusions, please. It's not
Okay. So scenario 3 is our best scenario. And about this, we conclude that when comparing the 3 alternative scenarios, it is clear that a reduction in rates causes a greater effect on the ethanol market than reduction in the cost of transport. It shows us much the tax policy needs to be revisited, since competitiveness gains can be guaranteed with new rates and import duties. Thank you, José Maria.
If you can close your presentation. We have Maria Soledad, please. The last presentation today. Sometimes I recommend to you all, when you do the presentation, you lost a lot of the time with the introduction part. And then and the details of the model was difficult to catch here. If you are interested, we're going to discuss and study. My case, when the first presentation that touched me a lot. And please, don't waste time with the general considerations. Let's go to the construction of the model and the results and conclusions, please.
Okay, I am ready. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Soledad Puechagut. I appreciate the opportunity to present the results of this study conducted jointly engineer Fernando Starros in this important conference. We both work in the National Institute of Agricultural Technology of Argentina. The title of our presentation is Circular Bioeconomy, Bioethanol Mini Distilleries in Fields. What are the background facts of bioethanol production in Argentina? In 2009, corn-based bioethanol production started in Argentina. At that time, production was planned in large-scale plants close to electricity and gas sources. In 2010, the national law regulating and promoting the production and use of biofuels was passed. Then in 2014, thanks to innovative technological advances, it was possible to consider corn-based ethanol production on a much smaller scale. This is important in three main senses. This smaller scale allowed plants to be located far from cities and electricity and gas sources. Also, applied lower investment requirements and allowed to propose a circular economy scheme to take advantage of all byproducts and waste. Today, 6 mini distilleries are operating in Argentina. In this map, we can see the location of mini distilleries in 3 provinces in Argentina. There are 2 in Santiago del Estero, 3 in Córdoba, and 1 in San Luis. And here we have the circular bioeconomy scheme analyzed in our study. First, corn is produced in field. It will go as grain to the mini distillery and as silage to digester, and in both forms to feedlot. In the mini distillery, the corn is transformed into ethanol that is sold to the oil companies, and into WDGS and stillage to go to the feedlot. The feedlot produces meat for domestic market and for exports. In addition, manure is collected to go to the digesters for processing. The biogas obtained from the digesters goes to the biogas plant to be transformed in thermal and electricity energy for operating to the entire scheme, and electrical energy to be sold to the national network. And finally, the digestate generated in the digester is used as fertilizer in corn and other crops production. This study was originated by the interest of the Chamber of Grain Industrializers and Biofuel Producers in Origin, CICBO, and carried out through a fluid private-public articulation. In September 2019, a technical assistance agreement was signed between INTA and CICBO to carry out a comprehensive study of bioethanol production in these kind of models. The agreement established the realization of 3 analyses. In this opportunity, we will present one of them, the analysis of economic indicators considering the sensitivity of key variables for the business unit analyzed. The economic analysis was carried out with the information and the productive scheme of the Tigombu business group in province of San Luis. The business units analyzed were agricultural production, integrated feedlot for exports, the mini distillery, and the biogas plant. And the indicators calculated for each business unit were the net present value, the internal rate of return, and the payback period. In this slide, we can see the results of the Tigombu Group scheme with information of the year from July 2018 to June 2019. We have in columns the business units and in rows the indicators. Business units that add value to raw materials and take advantage of waste from other activities show IRR equal or superior to the discount rate we considered in this study, which was 12%. Only the agricultural activity as vector shows an IRR much lower than that rate. These two units shows a payback period of 10 years. This one more or less years, and this much more than 10 years. Okay, now we will see a sensitivity analysis of some key variables for each business unit just on the IRR. Here we take different values of the corn price, the main variable in this unit, and considering the minimum, average, and maximum price in the period from 2009 and 2019, we can see significant variations in the indicator, but never this exceeds the discount rate. In the case of integrated feedlot with meat export, we consider variations on three variables. On one hand, different percentage increase in the price of corn and WGS prices. We can see that these changes generate small variations in the IRR. On the other hand, decreases in the price of meat exports generate sharp falls in this indicator. Okay, for the mini distillery, we assumed changes in different variables, but it was for these two variables that we saw large impacts. One of them is the bioethanol price. If we take the average price between 2014 to 2019, we can this average was 13% over the price taken to the base scenario. This change of price generate an IRR so much higher than in this situation. And the other variable with a high impact has to do with the cost of energy for the operation of the mini distillery. If the scheme did not include the biogas plant, it would have to use much more expensive source of electricity and gas, implying an IRR of only 2%. Finally, for the biogas plant, we don't perform a sensitivity analysis because the main variable that could affect the indicators would be the selling price of electricity. But this variable is fixed by contract for 15 years. In this case, we present a base situation considering just a nitrogen like as a nutrient in the digester, in the digestate. Sorry, and in this case we also include phosphorus and potassium, and we can see IRR in similar levels. Sorry. Okay, as we could see in the previous charts and graphs, we can summarize the conclusions by saying that the results show favorable signs towards the integration of activities in circular economy with bioethanol mini distilleries. The agricultural activity considered alone yields and IRR much lower than the discount rate considered in this study. On the other hand, the rest of activities that are part of the circular scheme reach or exceed that discount rate. And summarizing the sensitivity analysis, we can see that the price of corn is not a variable with much incidence for the integrated feedlot and mini distillery. On the contrary, the export price of meat is very important for the integrated feedlot. The selling price of ethanol is very relevant to mini distillery, and in order to make the mini distillery sustainable in this location, it's essential to have the biogas plant. And finally, I would like to highlight the main advantage of this circular economy scheme. This represents the possibility of taking advantage of waste that could otherwise be environmental liabilities, as in the case with feedlots. It allows to add value to raw materials, which transportation is inefficient with minimal processing, like corn to the port or feed for feedlot. Replaces fossil fuels with biofuels, allows for self-generation of energy, and promotes the reduction of freight vehicle circulation by routes and the local employment generation. Thank you very much.
Great presentations. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Very interesting. Okay, it's not easy. We have 13 minutes. It's enough time to, part of the questions, are in the chat. I invite you to take a look on the chat and the questions. Marnix answered questions about bees. Okay. There are some questions about what kind of species are related. It's only apis or melliferas or different species, and Marnix gave a very long explanation about this. I think that is written here. Okay. Any other questions? Let me see. I have some questions to William. Okay, I have some questions to William, but it's difficult to come. But it was a long time ago. Okay, William, are you here?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. My questions is related to this. You're a little bit pessimistic in your results about the incentives to use.
Right.
Now, the fact that if you let the private decisions and cost benefit analysis, you don't have any FAO results, or say you don't have the reduction of this waste. So you need policies. And what kind of policies do you think, if you can talk a little bit about this?
In terms of market coordination problems, which is usually what economists are worried about. They're worried about things like externalities or perhaps common good problems and the like. Beyond what we would normally think of in terms of, say, pure research, which are typically public goods. What I would like to emphasize is the importance at the level of the individual decision maker with respect to these decisions on quality, including then the proportions of losses. And if you introduce these new activities, perhaps coming out of the bioeconomy type of research, I'm specifically thinking in terms of the things that the Society of the Royal Society of Chemists were worried about. You have to consider what are the spillover effects on other things. if for some reason you come up with a new activity that's good for a farmer, he'll adopt it, but you're going to have to realize that there's some downstream effects. That's essentially what I'm trying to underline. And the two effects. One is the opportunity costs of quality change. You're producing quality now net more expensive in relation to just having some.
You have shown that in some situations when you try to improve quality, you raise the level of waste.
You'll raise the level of, in quotes, waste. It's simply things that would have otherwise gone to a traditional market will now go into what's now called the waste stream, which now has a higher value. Okay, and that's good that's one thing I wanted to point out. That's good for farmers. It's not necessarily good for consumers, but that's good for farmers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I haven't seen any other questions. I asked about Jamil. I think that it was important to have the idea of why they choose the 20%. She answered the question about this is a very interesting method. She showed that because it is to see when you put you make some simulations and then you force the model. Is the how do you say, the tail is shaking the dog. This is the idea of the model, that you just adjust the effect that you don't want, and then you have the changing and the flows between regions. So it's very interesting. Okay, I ask, and then I haven't seen any other question by people. So that we have 25 people here in it. Okay, to Maria Soledad from Jorge. Jorge, do you want to speak to make your question to Maria Soledad? Because you mentioned this yesterday, I was increasingly curious about this closed biorefinery. If you want to make the question directly, it's good. Please. Are you here, Jorge? It's difficult to make it dynamic. Please, if you want to talk, it's better.
Yeah, I can answer.
Yes, please answer. We don't have time.
Okay. I think the main reason beyond the initial costs is that the price of bioethanol has been falling in dollars over the last 5 years in Argentina. There is not a clear future about the value of the level of this price in the future.
I think I just managed to unmute myself here.
Okay.
But so you would say that the initial investment cost, that's not prohibitive to farmers. I mean, if the prices were at maybe a slightly higher value, do you think farmers would still adopt this technology? Because I'm sorry, I'm not aware of